Awesome. Wait, I didn't send Casey the thing. Sorry, I'll fix this part in post-prod. There we go. Let me send that to him. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. I guess it's back. Yeah. It is February. I had to look at that to remember. And today we are talking about uniqueness across streams. Let me share my screen and we can get the uncomfortable questions out of the way real fast. Yes, that is me. That's from when I was in high school. Hey, Jerry.
Is that you?
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
I didn't recognize you.
I'm telling to Nadine that you can find some funny pictures randomly.
No, that was me when I was like 16 or 17.
The beard's missing, that's it.
Yeah, and there's more stuff up here.
It's on the wrong other side.
Just a question, who do we have online besides?
Oh, just Brian right now.
Okay.
I have two up here, so if it says 4 participants, we've got the room, 2 that are me, and then Brian. Yeah, we're talking about uniqueness across streams. So when you have a stream, like a bank account stream in it, and you want to say, hey, what's the current balance of this account? That's pretty easy to do. You just get all the events for the stream, project them, boom, you've got a balance. Or you could say, for account 1, 2, 3, which customer is it owned by? At least in the event type examples. Let me pull that up real quick so we can see it. Also, this is my not logged into any of my personal accounts browser. So I'm going to use that for the meetup instead. What am I looking for? So event type, project, account component. I imagine there are some people that use Opera legitimately. I'm not one of them. It's useful. You never have to worry about accidentally flashing internal credentials or something if you use a browser that you're not logged in. Brett, come join us.
We have a pizza, Brett. I just want to say hi to Ethan.
Grab a piece of pizza and say hi and listen for a minute.
I wish I could have pizza. Thank you.
See you, man. So yes, in the account component example, they have a customer ID. So if you wanted to know if a particular account was owned by a particular customer, straightforward to answer that question. But if I said to you, tell me all of the accounts that are owned by customer ID ABC, how would you do that? The pause is what we're looking for. It's a difficult question to answer. There isn't a straightforward way to query all of the events for that, because that's a query across the streams. You could aggregate a list of accounts by the customer ID, but as far as just running a query directly on the events, that would be a pretty expensive query, because you'd basically be saying, select all of the messages where the category is account and type is opened, where customer ID equals our data, yeah.
Could you produce a secondary stream that indicates
You
the
could.
customer's accounts, and that's all it is I own this account, I own this account?
You could do that, yeah. You could do that as well. The challenge with either that or the aggregation approach is that suppose you needed to make a decision within the account component based on, like, does this customer have too many accounts or something? Any of those secondary things won't necessarily be up to date when you go to make that decision. And so you could end up with an incorrect response. And so that's what we're looking at today, is dealing with these kinds of problems. And I'm really sad that I just did all that verbally. The whole reason I brought this was to draw that on the screen. I didn't do it. Anyway, so the context we're looking at then for today is, I hit the X. All the pixels on the screen were, that seemed like a legit thing from Opera about getting $10,000 cash back, but whenever I see that online, I just assume that's a scam. Like, I know Opera is a real browser, but so the question that we're looking at first is honestly, let me see what it is first. We're doing a user registration and you want to make sure that you don't get multiple users registering with the same email address. So uniqueness of something across streams. Now then, that said, don't roll your own user registration if you can avoid it. It's probably a lot better to use something like Auth0 or Okta can handle that for you. But this isn't so much an interesting domain problem as it is, let's look at the capabilities of MessageDB and EventTide to help solve this kind of a thing. So are you all, let me stop sharing my screen because I have to go to the other browser real quick. You know what? I am so sorry. Here we are at LVT, and I did not pause to give a moment for our hosts to say something.
No, we are happy to host you. If you want to learn more about LVT, go to lvt.com and where you find some exciting material about us.
Awesome.
And we'd love to have Ethan present at our site. And thank you.
Thanks, Nadeem. And again, like I just want this to be recorded. Mega thanks to LVT for, sorry, I'm turning on Do Not Disturb. Let me rewind. Mega thanks to LVT for hosting us yet again, virtually this time because I brought the wrong laptop or didn't bring my work one. So thank you as always for hosting us. That's really grateful for that. And yeah, okay. So back to what we were talking about here. Let's see. Right, I needed to pull up you are going to be blown away by this event model. Could I get a drum roll, please?
Oh, man. Mind blown.
That's our event model for tonight.
This is orange.
Yeah. There is just the one event. As you know from the rules of these, a stream has a single owner. And for event streams, that means only one thing can write to it. For command streams, only one thing can read from it. There is no rule that says an application can't own a stream. It's less common, but like a Rails server can own an event stream. And so that's what we're doing tonight. We're going to have a web application where you submit a registration with an email, not even a password, because like no one would try to use somebody else's account out in the real world. So we're not going to worry about that. We're not actually going to deal with the Rails app just to keep it simple, but we're going to assume that's what it is. And we do have some code that we could look, well, we're going to look at the code. What I'm trying to say is GitLab such software meetup. Can never find anything in GitLab.
No, it's your account.
Yeah. Here we go. This is the one, and then got the meetup. Here's this little register. Let me put this, where could I put this? I'll put it in the Zoom chat, which is of course persistent, but if you want to grab that during the meeting, you can. I'll post it on the meetup page afterwards, but this is the repo we're working from. It is pretty simple. It's not even a component. Can you believe that? Is that big enough text? Yeah. Okay, let me kill the message store and bring it back up. I don't have like a nice flow where things don't work and then suddenly they do here. So it's a little bit like, here's the result. Let's talk through it. We have some tests though, so let's look at those first. All right, I have this register class that does the work of registration. And the idea is like if you had a Rails server, you could pull in this class if we packaged it as a gem, and then your controller method could call this class, basically. And so this is a test for it. We instantiate the class, we grab an email address from our controls, we make sure the control actually gave us something, and then we exercise the class. And then the rest of the test actually looks a lot like a typical component test because this class has a writer in it like components do. I'm sorry, like handlers do. And so we just make sure the right message was written. And so here's the chief insight here. Let me pull up the event model again real quick. What do you suppose that you could use as the identifiers for these streams to guarantee uniqueness of emails in the system.
The email address.
The email address. Yeah, that's what we'll do. The identifier for these streams will be the email address. And so, if you're familiar with something like Kafka or most message brokers, you know that like making a new topic or whatever equivalent of that those message brokers have is there's some ceremony to it. That's an operations thing. You probably wouldn't have Terraform for it, but you might have some self-service portal. You might have to go to an operations team and say, hey, we need this additional topic put into our Kafka cluster. In MessageDB, how do you make a new stream?
You write to that stream
Yeah.
and it is.
Yeah. I realize this is remedial for everybody here, but just in case somebody has a cousin for whom this isn't remedial and you want to show the video to, we're going to go into this in all the glorious detail. In MessageDB, of course, the messages are all stored in this one messages table, and there's a stream name column on it, and you have created a new stream when you write a message with a stream name value that isn't yet in the table. So there really aren't empty streams in MessageDB. Logically, conceptually, you can think of it that way, but until there is a message, there is no stream for it in MessageDB. So this here is an example of what one of our event streams would look like. How could I, if I want to write a registered event, this is literally the only one I'm dealing with, how would I know if an email address that I'm trying to use has been used before?
Stream already exists.
Stream already exists, yeah. And you folks who code with this, like, what would be the mechanical means by which you would verify that?
Right initial.
Right initial.
Right initial, yeah. Yeah, we get to skip to the syntactic sugar for it, but yeah, exactly. So this one is the golden path where it all just works. This test is testing that it isn't available. So what we do in this test is, this one has to actually hit MessageDB because the write substitute doesn't try to handle, you can set it into a mode where the next write will give you an expected version error. But for this test, what we needed to make sure was that we were calling it with initial correctly. Anyway, so we can look at the code, and this is great stuff here. Here's the class. Here's where we write it. And Swapna, you said it, write.initial, which is some sugar for writing with an expected version of no stream or -1. Yeah. I would probably put the no stream just to have the semantic name there. So what we're saying is MessageDB, we want to write this message to this stream. And in so doing, I am expecting that there are no messages in this stream. And then if there is one, it will give an error. And if there isn't one, it won't give an error. And that capability right there, to be able to do the expected version, is why Kafka will fail as a message store, because it can't do that. And nor should it do that, because it's not a database, it's a message transport. But a message store is a database optimized for messages. This is not a rag on Kafka statement, it's just, it serves a different purpose. And that has been brought up, like a bug report has been filed about that to the Kafka project, and they said, we are never going to implement this because this isn't what Kafka is. So there you go. That's how you make sure you aren't duplicating email addresses in your system. However, we can take this further, of course, all right. Let's see it working though, just because. If you pull down this repo, there's just the best README you've ever seen that assumes a whole lot of familiarity with how to get this stuff running. We have this interactive test here. Oh, neat. I didn't put a closing brace there, which doesn't matter because it's text, but it bothers me nonetheless. I know I like to fix things as soon as they're discovered. I am not going to do that right now. So you just run the interactive test, and I'll use my own. This is already out there, so whatever. And so the idea is, let's show the script real quick. This is as exciting of a script as you probably are imagining it. Look at this though, making use of command line arguments. That's pretty advanced stuff there. So you run the script and you supply an email address. And the idea is that this script would stand in for your HTTP request handler. And so you would try to register with the email. And if it worked, redirect to the success page or however you handle that. If it doesn't work, then redirect back to the forum saying, hey, we already have an account with that email. Although that's probably not a brilliant idea because now you've just provided the internet a scriptable way to find out the email addresses of everyone who has ever registered for your system. So what you will notice in the license information of this repo is don't directly put this in production because there's no warranty. But if you accept that, then do what you want with the code. So we can run that and I'll zoom in on the lower left panel. This is just debug output that happens when you run this in an interactive test. We got this successfully registered. We can then go to MessageDB and the zoom controls are always where you don't want them. Here is that registered event with that massive payload. And of course, if we run it again, then we get that was already taken. That all makes sense. So you can't query that effectively at runtime. You could write a query to do it, but the messages table in a long running system will grow very large. And for the queries it's designed to handle those, that's pretty fast. Getting your next batch of messages to process, getting all of the events for a particular stream to project, but just an ad hoc query across it. The message store is optimized for writing data, not reading it. So if you want to do something like that, you would typically do it in post-processing, view data aggregation, that kind of thing. But that's not helpful when you need to make a decision. Someone's trying to register right now. Should I allow them to? You have to take advantage of the capabilities that MessageDB makes available, and it gives you optimistic concurrency checking, so use that. Now then, I did not state the big assumption of this, which is once an email address is registered, it can never be used again, which typically is all right. I mean, we tend to not relinquish our email addresses and then swap them around. But what if you wanted to? What if it weren't email addresses and you had some thing that needed to be reserved and protected? How would you do that? Or another use case would be, this came up in the Eventide Slack, like suppose you were doing an invoicing system and you wanted to have a sequence of invoice numbers. How would you manage a sequence? This isn't a question where it's like, I've got this all figured out. I figured we could do some interactive design stuff. And I could connect with this and then we could take turns drawing on it and then.
Did you get a new Apple Pen and you are aching to use it?
Kind of, I have used it.
I'd say that as a friend. I would do the same thing. That wasn't a criticism, I was just interested. Can we back up 1 second?
We sure can.
And I'm going to ask an embarrassing question. You said that the way you've got it implemented would allow someone to come and query your site to find out registered email addresses. But that's what all websites do if you go to register again. What's the more correct way?
They send you an email and you don't ever see and know if what you typed was correct.
I've seen plenty of websites that do.
They're old and they need to be replaced.
Yeah, like what it could be is like they won't directly tell you necessarily that one's taken. They'll say, hey, thanks, we received your request. Check your email for a confirmation email.
That's the more common way now. You're right.
Yeah.
More secure way.
Secure.
Yeah.
Other fun things is like when you try to access a protected thing that you don't have access to, rather than giving you the 403, you're not authorized to see this, they just give you a 404, like, couldn't find it.
Yeah.
They're lying. It's there, they found it, they just didn't want to tell you.
That's not a great way because then your user who's already registered and doesn't remember gets a 404. It's better to send the email and say, hey, remember you registered.
Well, better, there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I meant by that. Anyway, we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
No, your question was not off topic. Me rabbit holing was off topic.
Okay.
Anyway, neat, I'm sharing the screen. So, yeah, so suppose you had, I just really want to, yes, you want to have a oh my goodness, this is like an art program, and you can tell by the like
Orange peel
stylistic
texture.
chalk. Let me fix that. I don't even know how to use it.
You need to go for sketching.
How's that
Well,
one?
that's good.
Okay. Like an invoice sequence. I have the dumbest joke that I've just been dying to say all night so far.
Go for it.
Okay. I remember. But it's not even a word. You know the Beyonce song, If You Like It, Should Have Put a Ring on It? Well, it's like if you need to manage its uniqueness, you should put a component around it. Yeah, that's my best that I got there.
You work on that one a little while, and bet you come up with something that has a punch to it as well.
I have some notes.
Thanks. I'll cut that part. I won't. Yeah, but it's like, so suppose you needed to get a sequence of numbers. Like the trouble with a sequence is if you query, things can get stale and like, I guess like, suppose you're doing invoices and it's multi-tenant. You have different clients or you have different customers using your system, but for each of those customers, you would like them to have their own sequence of invoice numbers. So you're a customer, you would send invoice one, SwapNet, you could send an invoice one. It's not the same one. How would you do that? That's a uniqueness problem.
That's tied to a company name. Each one has its own invoice number, so the uniqueness would be company name.
Yeah. Probably an identifier for it, I would say, but yeah.
Identifier.
Are you saying that you could have duplicate invoices per customer across or individually for customers? Like customer one would have invoice one, customer two could have an invoice one, but it's tied directly to them?
Because the customers, they're using this software to send invoices to their
Their customers.
Yeah.
Okay.
And why did this suddenly stop working?
You could just use cardinal IDs and the other IDs for that. So you could have like your customer name dash and then their invoice ID. That would make it unique per customer. Did anyone hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ethan's having technical problems.
He was going to say correct, but he has to do this first.
Okay.
I'm so upset with this.
Just open the notes.
Yeah, you know what? This is a big fail.
It's a new pen.
This happened once before. I probably would have to reboot the whole thing. So we're going to just stop sharing. Yeah, so I'm sorry. I heard you, but I was so preoccupied with my technology not working, Brian. Would you say it again?
Yeah, so there's a way to use a cardinal ID, and I forget what the other name of the other ID is, but basically you have like one ID plus another ID in a stream name. So you could have like either the customer's ID plus their invoice ID or the customer's name plus their invoice ID or some variation of that to make it unique per customer.
Let's follow that. So you might have something like invoice, if I'm understanding you correctly. Oh, let me use the smallest font size possible. So quick. Are you suggesting something like that?
Yeah, but I think it's plus, if I'm not mistaken. Okay.
You're correct. Yep. Okay, so let's say we did that. And like we had invoice ABC one, invoice AB. I did it again right after we just talked about that. And customer ABC comes in saying, hey, I want to make another invoice. How do you know that it should be 3 inside your handler?
Well, you'd have to query all the previous ones. That'd take too long if it's all
Yeah.
lost.
Oh, you want
Yeah.
them to have an auto incrementing invoice ID?
Yeah, they get a sequence for them.
Oh, I was just gonna stick units for all of them.
I gotcha. Yeah, it's because their clients, they want to have a more human readable invoice identifier. Like the
Could they
customers.
provide the invoice identifier in the interface? Like, yeah, okay, give me your invoice ID because it's your system coming from their system.
You could, but like we're building this system and our customers are using it. Like we're FreshBooks or something, let's say. I don't know if you've ever used FreshBooks. We're Intuit. That's something people are more familiar with. QuickBooks. And we're generating invoices on behalf of our customers to send to theirs.
Well, MessageDB has probably got a sequence for each of these streams.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be how it keeps track of its expected versions anyhow, as an underlying sequence in the database? How does it do that?
How does it do it? That's a great question.
I don't imagine they want you to query that sequence.
Couldn't you
But
run,
the framework could possibly offer it. I don't know, I'm guessing.
you can't store data in the stream to read and just always call the same stream and then see what the most recent one was? Is that not possible?
You're going down the way that I would go down this.
Okay.
Let's answer Justin's questions real fast. But no. Like seriously, if you like it, then you should have put a stream around it. How's that? Database functions, write message. How is the position managed? That was your question, Justin.
Yep.
So I can't fluently read Postgres stored functions, so hopefully we can make some sense of this. This is the write message when you write. This is what ultimately gets called down in the database. If you were to ever port event-tide, you need to understand this server function very well. It has a parameter list on here. There's that expected version that we made use of earlier, but apparently you declare variables up at the very front of the function here, a little bit like how C works. But they do there's a stream version function here, which is another stored function. So can we click through to that? No, it doesn't understand that. So if we come here to stream version, it does a query to get the max position from the stream name that was passed. And so it's a quick query, hey stream, or give me the max position where message's stream name equals the stream name that was passed in.
Oh, so it doesn't have a database sequence.
Does not,
It
yeah.
actually
So this is a global position?
The position column within a stream. The global position does come from a sequence, that's correct.
Stream position.
Stream position.
Okay.
So then that is what's used in the rest of the query. And so they calculate next position. And then when you go to write the message, next position is put into the actual insert into the messages table.
And if it doesn't turn out to be, then it's an unexpected version and it rejects.
That's right, yeah. So the position column will never have gaps in it.
Yeah.
Because it will fail to write or it will succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take what Eric was saying, that some stream, you could have a component. Were you about to say the same thing?
Oh, I mean, go ahead. I mean, yes, but go ahead.
No, take it. Okay.
Well, pushing on this just a little bit further before
Yeah.
we move on, then it must be optimized to give you the max of a position of a stream.
It could, yes.
So the event-tide framework could just offer that to you.
It could,
But
but each invoice going in its own stream, these have their own independent position sequence.
right, that's what I'm saying. If you say max position, invoice dash ABC plus one, it's gonna give you where you are in your sequence.
For invoice one.
Yeah, but each one of those stream names is now a unique stream. And
Oh,
so
I
you
see.
have different
Yeah,
positions on each.
We want to know to put one there or to put two there or to put,
Yeah, I see.
yeah,
A whole new stream, yeah,
yeah.
with a unique ID. Okay.
It's a kind of substream.
So Eric, you said, well, what if there was a stream that could just give you these numbers? What if there was
Correct.
a sequence, like in the database, in Postgres, a sequence is an actual construct that you create and you can query from it. When you do, it increments it. Well, why couldn't you have, say, like maybe that's a silly name for it, but like an invoice sequence indexed by customer ID. And then you could send it a command that's like generate, or I don't know what you call it. This is a pretty mechanical stream, by the way, so you're gonna have like low level technical language here. But you could send it a generate command, and then it could write a generated event whose payload is like, I don't know, let's just call it number 1, right? So you send it a command, through PubSub you can observe its results, or maybe it's just within the same component, who knows? But the sequence itself gets a stream wrapped around it, and you can you have some component that owns that category of streams. And
A stream for the customer, just for the sequence.
Does that make sense? Like, if it doesn't, that's okay. Like, there's no shame in not getting it,
It
but
seems a teensy bit, I've always had this idea that I want my streams, the messages in my streams to be human readable, so you could go and say, what happened in my system? And this one would be particularly boring,
it would.
but it's the reality.
Yeah. And one of the things when you start getting into designs like this, like you realize why people like to do things in gigantic relational databases, because they do a lot of heavy lifting for you. At work, we had a thing where we really understood like linking tables, you know, where you like where the rows are just foreign key. Yeah. Like those do a lot of heavy lifting for you in an application. As soon as you don't have them anymore, the equivalent stream mechanics to make that work, it's like
Super long.
It's a lot. But it's what you got to do to build something that can scale a lot. But anyway, yeah, so all we're doing is reinventing database sequences. But now we can have this in a distributed fashion.
You have something like this at LVT. And but instead of doing an incremental number, you're getting from a pool of random numbers. That's about as much as I'll leave it.
That's
You can
what
find
I'm
that later.
thinking about, the pinpool thing.
Can it be just global service?
It could, yeah, if there were a component, like you made a separate component to handle this.
Component to
Yeah, if
just-
you wanted like one global sequence for everything, you could do it and just make sure everyone uses the same
Right.
identifier here. Yeah. And so like that component would write a generated event each time it consumed a number. And so how would you know what the next one is? Well, just project it. You would know what the next one is. That's how I would do it. So you don't even work in this stuff day in, day out, but you intuited the solution. That's awesome.
I'm thinking about it. Having Rick in my team now.
Yeah.
So like one of the weirdest things for me getting into this kind of building stuff was like, what should I put a stream around? Like moving away from the CRUD world, we're like, oh, I'd have a user stream. Well, no, dismantle that. I would break that into several different things. But like, wow, yeah, I could legitimately have a component responsible for generating sequence numbers. And that seems really low level and mechanical, and it is. You could probably generalize this too and release it as an open source package. It's like, this is the sequence component, and just choose your identifiers properly. And they could just give you sequence numbers. So,
Why, I mean, just another way is, what if you had to generate invoice and you have an event, but that has a position on it or a version, then you can just create another event and, create invoice with I guess your invoice number. So instead of having a separate service, it just kind of cascades into the next one based on the previous.
Multiple streams.
like this one component could own the sequence streams as well. You could do that. And maybe you would, because does anyone else need my sequence
If
numbers?
you don't want the generic thing, that's just a
Yeah.
little bit simpler.
You don't have to deploy a separate component.
You'd save the round trip of writing the message, waiting for the response as well.
And
So,
also a second
Yeah.
repo and a second line and.
yeah, there's that could very well be a much better way to do it. You could still do that as a gem though. It just wouldn't be an independent component gem. You could just like put whatever machinery you need to make that work. So when you're handling the event, so the one thing that could lead to, the other one probably could too, is you might end up with gaps in your invoice number sequence. Because if you're handling the generate invoice command and you do something that consumes the sequence number and then you crash, when you come back to life, if you haven't made a record of that invoice number yet, then you would end up generating another one for the same command. That's fine. I doubt that.
Unless you're OCD, I mean, this could really, really cause some trouble.
It might.
It's like, there's a missing one.
Yeah,
Be faster.
but, yeah.
Might get a little weird around audit time.
What happened to that one? But you'd have a record of it. You'd see it was generated but never used for anything. So, yeah, it might be odd.
But then you have to have a technical explanation for your auditors that they would understand.
Yeah.
Well, that's because we
About how you're generating.
crash and restart.
So if it's like an orchestrating component that's being told, hey, generate one new invoice, it's projecting over itself to say, okay, I need to make one of this invoice ID or invoice number. Then it uses essentially what we talked about with reservation for each one to be unique and does a right initial for the projected number it should be on.
Yeah.
So when it's replaying the command, it keeps trying to do that one, but ignores that it's failing to write the initial because that one's still doing whatever it's supposed to do before it subscribes to that event saying it was generated and says, oh, I generated this ID. I don't have to worry about that. That event was, or that command has been processed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't have to have gaps.
It doesn't. I would say the general principle to take from all of this is one, that doing any kind of a validation or query across the streams is difficult because it's optimized for writing, not for reading. And so if there is some sort of a resource that needs to be unique or sequenced like this, it needs to be a component. So if we wanted to be able to like release an email address, like you typed the wrong one accidentally, and now you just consumed somebody else's, oh no. Well, you could have a separate component that as part of the registration process, it's like, hey, email address A, are you available? No, okay, let me bubble the error back up to the user. So you could have like a release command that goes to an email address as well. But if it needs to be globally unique, it can't be contained within the kind of stream that needs to use that thing, right? So like registration streams with email addresses, if it needs to be globally unique, the data for that can't be within a stream related to registration. So something else needs to own that. Although in our example, it was the same because it was indexed by the email address. Incidentally, don't index your streams by email address directly if you care about right to be forgotten legislation. So what you can do, and I made a comment of it in the code, is you could hash the email address or make a V5 UID out of it or something. So you could know if you've seen that email address before, but you wouldn't be able to recover the email addresses from the stream names. So I don't know.
Alternatively, if you don't need to care about the state of each invoice, just put all the invoices in the same stream.
For a given customer. Yeah, you absolutely could. Yeah, if you didn't have, if they were indexed like that, you would just have, that would become a very large stream, potentially, hopefully. You have customers making invoices. Lots of ways to do it. Streams are your partition points. Within a stream, you can track all the stuff that you want. It's just across streams that it becomes difficult.
Don't cross the streams. I've never heard this before.
That would be bad.
Ghostbusters.
How bad? Imagine.
Yeah, but ABBA says to cross the stream.
Oh.
She's got a song, I Have a Dream. across the stream.
She obviously hasn't been in one of these.
Yeah. He must have been using Kafka. I don't even know what that means.
Java?
Yeah.
It's a band.
Oh, no, using Kafka, I don't know what that
okay.
means. Waterloo,
Yeah.
Dancing Queen, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
Classics. I don't have anything else. Thanks for coming, everyone. And if you don't want to have content like this every month, who wants to present next time?
We'll think about it. We'll get back to you. We know how to reach you. Yeah. We have a question, Brian and I, we've been meaning to ask. We have a few minutes left.
Is this generic enough that you would like to keep it in the
Yeah,
recording?
definitely. In one of your previous presentations, you said that you could create idempotence for the command, so you wouldn't write the command more than once, but you hadn't done so for the demonstration. And Brian has asked several times.
Oh, didn't I? I thought I did this.
Maybe you did it in the repo or something. I guess we did.
Yeah, let me pull that up here. To Justin's question, let me put up on the screen a representation of what you're talking about. I think it's in here where, there we go. And then come back to Zoom. So in the funds transfer example, pull that up real quick. Handlers, no. What would this be? This would be in the events handler. So this is the funds transfer component example, an event tied when it's handling its own initiated event. That is not a lot of context for everybody, but this handler just every time writes a withdraw command here, where most handlers like let me pull up the handlers commands here, have an idempotence check in them. So which funds transfer, project it, have we already initiated this one? If not, write the initiated event. In contrast to that one, the initiated handler that is for this event that's about to be written, notice it does not have an idempotence check in it. It's just every time you hit it, it goes ahead and writes the withdraw command to the account component. And it will give you correct results because the account component itself is idempotent. So you can write as many of those as you want, and account won't double withdraw the money. But Aaron Jensen pointed out, probably in October, when we first talked about this, he's like, yeah, that's true, but thousands of funds transfers times that restarts, that's a lot of messages that are waste. So from an operations standpoint, that may cause you problems. And so the example we were using over the past couple of months with this composite video generator and device video retrieval mechanism, totally hypothetical situation, not related to any company that exists in the real world. Okay, for the record, internet, this system is not implemented anywhere in the real world. It was just inspired by a real world
You keep
problem.
making that joke and they may confuse you, but truthfully, it isn't.
Yeah. I had a similar thing where there was an initiated event and it would just send a command to retrieve a video from a device. So I changed the code. So there's this white box here, like the event modeling official thing doesn't have any way to represent two messages being written in response to one. So this is an innovation that I came up with, drawing a box. So innovative. And I put both of these messages in here. So the handler, what it does is when it gets to the initiated, it writes, well, first it's going to check to see if it has already sent the retrieve message. So the first time through, it will not have sent it, and then it will send it and then write this. Now, the careful observer would note this cannot possibly be an atomic write because it's to two different streams. So you still could write this and crash before you write this. So it's not foolproof. It won't, there are cases where you will get a duplicate here, but you probably won't get a duplicate every time the component restarts. So that's the gist of it, is send the command, record an event that we sent the command. That's one way to do it, maybe a little extreme. The other is, and we can look at the code for it, but let's go back to the funds transfer component. If you had just, oh my dear goodness, copy code like that and put it into the initiated handler. And instead of this, you had like a withdrawn. Is that making sense?
Not yet.
This is still, you could crash and end up writing more than one. You just
could.
are less likely to, because you'll have, we're already doing this pattern. I was wondering if there was some way to like completely prevent extra commands from being written, because you can't do like the same version stuff, because you're not in control of the version. I guess it's a different stream. You don't have the entity that you're going to query for the command.
That's right.
So I guess you could do like a write initial, as long as every command had a completely unique like identifier in whatever project you were doing. But that's like the only thing I could think of.
And technically, you could get the entity if you had a separate store. You can have more than one store projecting over different streams, but I'm not saying that's correct. I'm just
Yeah, with questions like these, there's always the what's mechanically possible, which is a different set from what's a good idea. But I like to start with the what's possible first.
So one is write a message to your own stream that you've sent the command.
Yeah.
And the other is, show me the other again.
It was just to, like in this handler right here, we could check to see if we already had the initiated.
Oh.
So this one,
Handler checks.
you can write two messages as a single Postgres transaction, in which case it would be fine.
to the same stream. Although if you manually used your Postgres
If
connection.
you weren't necessarily using just what event type gives
Yeah.
you. If you had your own interface that you've come up with or interacting with, because the message store is just a Postgres database.
Right.
Right. So you can theoretically,
Any two in a
you
transaction.
can write raw SQL that starts a transaction and writes the two messages.
Also technically possible, but I would prefer not to if I'm using event tied.
There are very good reasons not to, but fun fact, first draft of my book, you could write any number of messages to any number of streams in one transaction.
That you want.
Like,
The book you've got.
yeah, then I learned how the stuff works and quickly got rid of that. So the reason you wouldn't want to do it is because logically your streams are your partition points. And so you make no assumptions of continuous or guarantees order, anything outside of a given stream. I typically think of it at the category level, that I would never assume that two categories happen to be in the same database. Like you could technically pull that out, that's valid. I wrote code that did it. The danger is now those categories must always coexist in the same message store. If you build your whole system with that assumption, there's danger. Like that's a major removing of the safeties on the holodeck thing there.
Is that why MessageDB does it that way? I mean, they explicitly do it for that.
Yep, exactly.
So what if we did, I can't see what this example is too well, but if we wrote, okay, so this is the video one, right?
Yeah, which is a lot like how funds transfer works. I don't have, no, wait a second. What am I talking about? I have made this one called funds transfer. It's the one that has.
Okay.
There we go.
I'm just referring to the other one where you had the 1 and the 2. What if you wrote the 1 and the 2 in the same stream and then you cascade that one to the other stream? So you have a duplicate.
Second event is technically a response to having written the command, so that you don't write the command again.
Yeah, the issue that I think the issue is when you're writing the command to another stream, you're waiting a little bit for like the other stream to say, I did the thing that you wanted me to do, and then you write, okay, that thing's been done in your own stream. And during that wait period, theoretically you can crash. And because you don't have anything to check but your own stream, you're going to write the command again, right? Because you don't know that it's been processed yet.
You want that command before the event.
That's why Ethan has the 1 and then the 2. The 2 represents I wrote to my own stream saying I finished writing a command.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't know that if it's gonna then listen for another.
Yeah.
So if you have like a process that takes a long time to come back, then writing the second event to your stream kind of nullifies a lot of that time gap that you would have. It's not perfect, but it's better than than just waiting.
I would be genuinely surprised. It may in practice never happen that you crash in between those, but given enough time, you're going to redeploy the component. It will happen at some point that they don't both work, but at least it's not happening every time. And especially with this particular example, where we're fetching a video file over cell from a remotely connected device, there's a lot of opportunity in there to duplicate. You might be able to do some weird things by playing with the stream identifier. Like if
That's what I was thinking. Like
a posit ID in here. But now that's starting to get weird. I wouldn't.
You gotta keep in mind that you should be building your systems with idempotence already in the forefront of the design. So if you've got a system like what Ethan has here, really your only danger is getting an extra message on the edge cases, on the outliers that are not common, not frequent. And if that's the case, then you're mostly covered, and it's okay to be mostly covered because you've already taken on the understanding that you're going to have repeat messages.
Right. I just, when we were talking in the other meeting, Ethan alluded to the fact that, oh, I should have prevented this from happening. And I was like, wait, can you totally prevent that from happening? Was my question.
I'm sorry if I phrased it in a way that gave that impression. That wasn't my intent.
No problem. That's why I wanted to ask the question, because I was like, this guy knows something I don't. And I want to know it. So
I do want to say though, like, don't be afraid to think outside the box, to do things that are not provided by Eventide's libraries. Like, what they've given you are a set of tools. You're the architect. Even what they've created are just based on the commonalities of the processes that they've run into, the things that are common to them. And so they've made conventions and syntactic sugars and things because it made sense for them. But design your systems. Now, granted, if you're going to deviate from that stuff, obviously you need to put on your expert hat and actually understand what you're doing. But that's implied by being the designer, the architect of your system.
I would say there are 1 or 2 fundamental rules I would say never ever break these. One of them being don't cross the streams kind of a thing. Like don't give an event stream multiple owners. That's just the way of pain.
Yeah, you should understand the reasons why they have things set up the way they have it before you start introducing more. But don't be afraid to fulfill your use cases.
Event sourcing fundamentals versus event-tied choices.
Yes.
Don't cross the first ones.
Yes.
And this wasn't like a super important use case. Who cares? I mean, except for extra things, like taking up a little bit of extra space in the database. I don't care if like 1 extra command or 2 gets written occasionally.
At sufficient scale, it could be a problem, but yeah, like, yes. And as long as you're mostly covered, every now and then it's not going to be an issue. At sufficient scale, a little bit will be an issue, but then you can look at other countermeasures at that point. Everything's a problem.
At that point, there's a lot of different problems.
Yeah.
So what was your other diagram you started putting up?
Oh, that was the funds transfer. I did actually make a diagram for the funds transfer and account component. I thought I didn't have one, but I do because I started paying for Lucid Chart again.
A wise.
30-day expired?
Yeah, I just canceled it, but it's like, it's useful. But
I think we made this too, actually.
have you? It's a good exercise. Anyway,
So don't cross the streams. So I would like to understand here. So here the account transfer and the funds transfer, both are writing to the funds transfer category.
that is it's not strictly the arrows show causation, not who's actually writing the message, if that makes sense. Like this message exists because this one occurred, but it is this component up here that observes this message and then writes to itself.
So we are not worried about the event. We are worried about only the commands that not to be written by two different streams. There shouldn't be two different owners that writing to the same stream.
To the same event streams, yes. Yeah.
The event streams have one owner.
Yes, but I'm seeing here, the funds transfer is writing the initiated event, and also the account transaction is also writing the withdrawn event. So there are
It is
two-
causing that event. It is not writing.
It's not writing it.
Funds
The
transfer.
funds transfer is subscribed, observes, and writes to itself.
So it's just the causation, but not you.
Yeah, so
You will not be seeing that
the
event.
transfer component that has the initiated event is listening for that withdrawn event.
Consuming. There's a consumer.
Yes,
for-
it is listening for that. It's subscribed to that stream. So the top event or the top component is listening to that bottom stream. And when that event is published by that component, it writes its own event saying it was also withdrawn. So that bottom event leads or caused the top event, but the writer
Didn't write it.
is the consumer or the component that's responsible for that stream.
Oh, okay.
And that's extremely important.
No, but that you saw this diagram and took that from it, to me says there's a weakness in this way of representing it. And I haven't found a better way, like, because you have to explain that every single time. Not like, I mean, now that you know it, you won't ask the question again, but every new person would logically draw that understanding from this.
I would say that I have experienced this in one of our projects, and we have done the same thing, similar thing, but
Okay.
it's been a while. I didn't touch that code and that representation. I lost the context.
Okay,
Now,
that's fair.
after recollecting that, I remember that, but representing that in a different way would be a little more clear and
Yeah.
catchy. I agree.
So if y'all come up with a different way of representing that concept, like, I'm all ears, because I want it to be straight.
A diagram that shows the way components communicate with each other in order, but we didn't divide the streams up. And it was already an incredibly complicated and arrowy covered diagram. So I don't know. That's
Yeah,
a
it's
real
tricky
challenge.
question. The way that event modeling does it is like every event goes into a view data box. And then I'm not sure how the next event occurs. No, they have a processor thing. Yeah, they would have, that's right. Pretend that that's a gear and not a circle with an X in it. They would draw it like this. So like you would call, can I not put text there? I can't. You would basically repeat the name of the component here, but that was weird to me to have the names of the
Yeah,
component over
because
here
it's
and
already in
also
the
there.
stream.
Would it be inappropriate just to put a note box explaining what?
I think it really comes down to just getting comfortable reading the diagram style.
But you
You know
have
that the only thing that can write in that stream is the stream that's listed at the left. The only,
You need some way to distinguish observation and writes, and we're just using arrows for both. So if you use something else to indicate observation,
I
then
consume.
maybe it would.
Yeah.
Changing that arrow to something else.
In my
a different
diagram, I used
representation.
dashed arrows for consumes and
I will give a little teaser that.
But it wasn't meant, mine wasn't meant to be an event model. It was something totally different.
I will give a little teaser that this is not the only way that is commonly used to model event tides flows.
If you know another common way and it's totally available, please send us a list because we struggle with event
I was
modeling
gonna say,
all the time.
one of these days we should get Scott or Nathan or Aaron to come on and explain how they model events because they don't use
Yeah.
event modeling.
I would literally order them a pizza to do that.
Okay, there's your next.
We
Send it
have
to
that
their location.
event-tide.
I would do it, but I haven't participated in those discussions yet
Yes,
at
he's
my new
there.
company.
That's our next topic, Ethan.
I would love it.
That
Yeah,
would
so
be so-
Scott, Nathan, and Aaron, because you're totally gonna watch the recording of this meetup. We want you.
Reach out on the event tide side.
Yeah. No, yeah, I would. Event modeling has been useful because it was something written, but like,
Yeah.
I don't strictly follow event modeling like this.
We have started adding pink boxes to show entity state over time. Because like sometimes you can't keep it stuffed in your head and putting it down of like, this is what the entity state would be here and therefore this will come next in these scenarios. So you can't just keep it all in your head and putting it in the code. Yeah, that's the most definitive, but we've added pink boxes for entity state.
Okay.
I do like that. I like the entity.
Yeah.
We use
You
that,
use pink for that too?
Yeah, I don't know who started it, but yeah.
but we use.
We took it from Jerry's team, actually.
Oh, okay.
It might have
That's
been
why he
Scott.
started using
Maybe on our-
pink.
We started it with the, with Casey back when we were doing
Yeah, I
the,
think
Some project.
some project,
Yeah,
yeah, some
the-
project. The project that some of you were on, actually.
STP. That's a
yeah.
bad. acronym.
Yeah, but yeah, we started finding it useful. We weren't using it to keep track of the entity over time. We were just trying to model what the entity should look like as we were designing the stream.
Yeah. Well, we have cases where we start a process that will repeat a second process 2, 3, or 4 times, an unknown number, before it completes the first process. And so
A loop
keeping
of
a
n
visualization of your entity to guide you as you're writing the code is very, very helpful. I mean, it's not, if this is a contract with the business, those pink boxes shouldn't be shown. It's just an engineering view, but
Was there a reason why the entities are not represented on the event model? For the event community?
Yeah, so in event modeling, they don't represent them. Event,
One thing to keep in mind is that the entity is very specific to the implementation.
yeah.
The events are not specific to the implementation. The events can be listened to by many other
Right.
other domains or whatever, who cares?
Right.
And they'll have their own entities that are going to be formed based off of those things, potentially.
But each of these components, they do have some sort of entity in there, right?
But it's only a cache for the running system. So if you want a history of what happened in your business, the entities are not useful. They don't go into the message store at all. So you don't, they're probably not in event modeling because they aren't events in the event store.
Right.
They're just not. But it's really useful when you're engineering to pick up a pink box and say, this would be the state of my entity at this point.
So since you started that conversation, if we have the entity box and you can represent how its state changed through the time, that's very easy to understand in a diagram.
Yeah. It has been for us so far.
With all the commands and events, it's easy to just kind of track it.
You
But
can have
not at
multiple
every
cases
state.
too.
But not at every state. You can consolidate and say what are the things you can represent in that state. But you cannot, if you add those every state in every action or every command
No, not every
it's
state,
very-
but useful states.
Yeah.
There are useful states. You can have like the happy path, and then you can have like an idempotence check state where it's like, here's your happy path states where everything just flows through. And then you can have another copy of the same diagram down below that's like, okay, we crashed at this point. Will we will our endpoints check work at certain points? Like there's, I don't know, there's like some use to it. When you're handling like a loop, like Justin says, where you're doing end things and you are trying to determine, okay, well, how do I determine if I've already done the next thing in the set without recording a big set of things? Anyway.
The gearboxes that you mentioned earlier, I don't remember, unless the documentation has changed over to event modeling, I don't remember them ever being a components name. If you're just doing components, like my team does, we rarely use user interfaces because we integrate systems. It's always components talking to components. I don't remember ever a component being represented up above like that.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to speak for the event modeling folks who are not here. As I understand it, is they don't have the same component model that Eventide has. And so they have this notion of processors. And so like, you'll notice that every single event goes to these views, they don't call them view data, they're views, read models. They say like every event should produce an entry in a to-do list. And then you have these various processors. Like the to-do list is like a relational table separate from all of the messages. So I get an event, I write an entry into a to-do list, and then there are these things called processors that then process through that table of to-do items. I think there may be cases where that would make sense, but that to me seems like a lot of machinery and ceremony to do what components already do. Like what's a processor if it isn't a component?
Yeah.
So that would be my criticism of the work. But the process they laid out, the general process of how to come up with these, found to be useful in introducing new people to the ideas. But it's always couched with like, yeah, but don't do that part because that's how we do it in Eventide. So I'd love to have them come and describe how they do it. Like to reduce the design to a process, I think is always going to be fraught with peril because there's no like guaranteed process. If I drop in a few hours, I get a proper system design out the other end. But at least to understand like, to start seeing the thought process through some specific examples and even like the pattern language itself, these visual representations do aid in understanding, I think.
Well, we do one every single time.
And that's how you start.
Yeah, well, and then we usually tweak it along the way and we refer back to it. So we find our event models very useful, but there are some gaps still in the technique when you're building event-tied components.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate to ask what you're doing at your organization?
We did the sort of, there's a word that comes to mind that starts with B, but modified version of event modeling that I would have talked about here.
So again, in that
With a
right,
D.
it's a tool, right?
Yes,
And you may have to adjust that tool for your individual needs.
that's right. Yeah.
Even in the across the team, how you represent the event modeling versus how we represent, there is a lot of difference,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it differs from person to person. I mean, if three of you are doing event modeling, you're gonna come up with a different pattern than if we are doing it.
Yeah.
That's true.
Again, it's a tool.
Yeah,
Does it accomplish what that?
but I like the idea of having a detailed kind of discussion on event modeling for the next session.
When we started this journey at LiveView, I presented a thing to the whole group and said event modeling for everyone, where product would participate, and it was the contract between the business needs and the engineers. And it didn't really pan out that way. It mostly has become engineers use it for their design material. And
That's unfortunate because when you're designing these systems, it's important to have
The product is.
well, we are
domain
still.
experts, not necessarily like if you're doing something for the manufacturing team, there should be a representative of the manufacturing team talking about what kind of data is.
No, it's not that. It's not that. It's just that those people that we talk to and sign off on what we are about to build never look at the event models. It just, their eyes glaze over and it just doesn't work. It's not that we're not having the conversations. And before we build the software and coming up with full agreement, it's just the event models have not been useful in filling that particular conversation.
Maybe people are getting little scared to see the huge event models, and they're like, no, whatever you say, follow. We don't want to look at it.
Yeah, it's like, I am working in manufacturing and building things, please just do this for me. No, we get them to have agreement on the full feature set and the use cases and each of the different scenarios that may arise, but they don't look at the event models.
It's like UMLs. Who looks at the UML diagram?
Right, the engineers.
Even they just look at a section of it, not the whole diagram, because it's overwhelming. And I think this is changing that conversation. Event modeling is a lot simpler to talk about than UMLs. So I think.
But it's still not simple enough in my experience.
So
they won't sit down at the table and participate. Not in the event modeling. Yes, we're doing appropriate discovery and getting contract buy-in before we build something.
Well, I would argue that the event model is part of discovery.
It is. That's our last step in discovery. We always say that the event model is our last step in discovery. And sometimes our product people have looked at it, but never the customers.
Yeah, because
is it supposed to go to customer? In the participation of event modeling?
With internal customers, in my idealized world, it would be. In LVT's case, I don't know that I would send it to one of your large customers. Like that might be a little weird. But if you have like close.
Traditionally.
Your friend, I'm interrupting.
Okay.
Interjecting. I'm trying to say that like the event model is supposed to, and really the job of a component is to follow whatever the real world process is.
Right.
Right. So it's very important that you are very intimate, and who's more intimate than the person who's going to be interacting with or whose process you are modeling, to know what steps happen where, what is an event, right?
I tried. I've even pointed people back to the recording over and over. No.
In some cases, though, the event model is more technical than the process itself, because it's like, how am I going to index this thing that I need to know about
Do components
and whatnot?
talk
So
to each other?
there's more, like, yeah, you are modeling the process, but there's more than just like, you could have a very simplified diagram that's like,
Right.
I want this to happen.
You simplify
And when that
and use
happens,
that.
I want this to happen. Yeah.
Well, it
And
hasn't
that's
been a
really what
huge
the
problem
customer
yet.
cares
I'm just
about.
reflecting back on the fact that that's what it was sold to me as, and I sold it to others, and it hasn't filled that specific role yet.
Okay,
Still very
let's
useful.
Let's take Ethan's example, the video retrieving and commanding some things.
Okay.
Okay, if that request comes in, for the business, for the customers, whoever you say, you will just go ahead and say, if you retrieve this, these are the things we will be collecting and we will be generating the video. That's a whole consolidated one.
Yeah.
You don't have to show every step. We are going requesting that if it fails or if it is happening, it is writing again the stream. If you say that, they may get overwhelmed, right? So,
Yeah, oh yeah, they do.
yeah, so just have a consolidated and simplified version of your event model where the other people who can understand, they may show interest. If you go and say every stream, this is writing the command to this stream and getting the entry.
If you ever get them asking, well, what if this case, you'll have the other one hopefully still available. You can show if you need, but they start with what they'll consume.
And slice that bit if you have some question. That's what I'm usually do if I have something on small chunk, get that slice and just only draw the boundary to that use case and discuss with them. You don't have to get everything showed to them and get overwhelmed and they will be like.
Yeah.
If it helps to get them involved, if that's your desire, your purpose or the industry standard that we think is the right answer, finding ways of doing what she's saying to simplify is making sense, whether we change the visual.
That's not exactly the event model either, so.
Okay.
I'm kind of reporting back that I found that it kind of isn't.
Oh, okay.
I'm not saying I'm trying to make them, I'm just saying what I thought it was in the beginning, I'm not so sure it's.
No, it is overwhelming. I mean, you see some of these event models, they are like circuit boards.
Back in the days, usually when we are designing, we will be having a high level designing and low level designing. Event model is pretty much like a low level designing for the engineers, and you should be having a high level designing that needs to be showed to the outside world.
Yeah.
I don't.
Workflows on that level.
Yeah. A minimal work.
Graphical work, right, and then you guys could translate it to the other piece. If they agree on the one part, then you have your customer insight and agreement and a collaboration alignment. So that might be enough instead of going on deep all the way.
So far, it has been for what we're doing.
Okay, so it sounds like you have
Internal customers.
results that show that. Cool.
That's good reporting back, though.
It is.
Suggests that we don't yet have the grand unified model yet.
We don't.
For both, and maybe it's a fool's errand to chase it, maybe it isn't, but we just want to find the
Interesting to find out how the event type guys.
Yeah.
This would be
Get that
very,
present.
very
What are
interesting.
their expectations?
Yeah.
I asked Scott, they don't do event modeling. We don't do event modeling. Eventually, you will get used to the things how you do, and you will be mapping yourself in your.
Oh, gosh.
And
if
I'm
we
like,
didn't have our event
no,
models,
I
we would
cannot.
not be able to keep track of we refer to our event model 6 times a day. It's not like 100 times a day, but
It's possible that whoever gave you these wild ideas of what event modeling could and couldn't do, if that person hadn't introduced you to the idea,
No.
you would have developed your own.
the heart and soul of
Could
it
that be?
we use all the time and we love it. Yeah.
See, even now, if I'm going to recollect my existing work project, I will for sure go and see the event model. Then only I will try to answer some questions. If not, I cannot remember everything.
It helps to see it.
You don't have to go and check in your
okay.
code.
It's
Yes.
like the Matrix.
You can just see
after a
that
while,
diagram.
You just see people and places. You don't see the code anymore.
Cool. Any other thoughts anybody has? We should record all of us saying in unison, Scott, Nathan, Aaron, please show it. No, that'd be silly.
Scott, Aaron.
All right, I'm gonna
Nobody?
stop the recording here. Hey, thanks for coming, everyone. And next month, we'll give you more than 2 days lead time.
Awesome.